So, what's your name,
My name is Sheryl Hall.
and what branch of service were you in?
I was in the Army.
And what were your dates of service?
On active duty, I enlisted and went to basic in September of 1985, and I got out of the regular Army in April of 1988, and I served in the reserves from 1988 to 1996.
So, why did you enlist?
I enlisted because I had went through college and really couldn't find a decent job and needed to get my loans paid off, and they offered to pay off my loans, and they offered to send me to school for what my dream job was physical therapist. And then my mom had served in the Navy, and she really strongly wanted one of her children to serve, and so that ended up being me.
Why did you pick the service branch you joined?
Well, my mother really wanted me to go to the Navy, but no other branch of service had any openings at the time, so it was the Army or nothing really.
And how old were you then?
I would have just turned 23.
Do you recall your first days in the service?
I do recall them. I think most people will never forget those first days. We flew out of Denver and we got to Fort Jackson, which is in South Carolina. It was really early in the morning, and the yelling started the minute we got off the bus, and they marched us all over to eat breakfast at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and we had to stand with our nose in the back of the person's head in front of us. We could not look around or anything. I ended up falling asleep standing up in formation, and they made me run around the whole company yelling, "I'm a crazy woman." And then when I got to the front of the company, I had to low crawl in the dirt across there. I had to do that 3 times
Oh, wow.
as my punishment.
So tell me more about your boot camp or like training experiences.
Boot camp I ended up having to go through 2 times. We got about halfway, well, a little over halfway through the first time, and the senior drill sergeant called 3 of us into his office. We were all 3 going into medical corps, and he told us that he didn't feel like we were doing our push-ups good enough for him, and that we were going to have to start at the very beginning. We were devastated. We thought it was the end of the world, and one gal, we really had to talk to her because she was, I cannot do this again, and she was just almost panicking, and we had to really talk to her and kind of stick together. And I remember one of the worst experiences for me was going through the gas chamber, and you have to go into a building that has gas in it, and you take off your gas mask and they ask you questions. The gas makes you tear, cough, nose runs, you can't breathe. People were panicking in there trying to get out. When they finally did let us out, you couldn't see anything, and you come stumbling out of there, and they had planted this big tree right in the middle of the path, so everyone was smacking into the tree, and the drill sergeants were taking pictures of us. That was probably the worst experience. And when we got to the second boot camp, we were supposed to have to go back through the gas chamber again, and one of the other gals and I, we were like, there's no way we're doing that. So we went and volunteered for kitchen duty, and our drill sergeant was not happy with us because we did that, but we just did not want to do that again.
So how did you get through it?
You learned really early on that you had to do it together. No one got through alone. You had to have help from your friends, and you had to give help. That was really the only way to get through it all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what type of work did you perform while in the service?
When I got over to Germany, I was in a medical unit, and we did medical support for all the other Allied forces in Germany. There were times when we would go out into the field, and like if someone got hurt, we would have to do the first aid. We also went down to the training areas and would run a clinic and support for units that were training down there. We had to do a lot of guard duty because there was terrorism in Germany at the time. So we guarded the bus stops, and we guarded the school buses for the American children. I also got to be a guard for military prisoners that were waiting trial and waiting to be sentenced, and that was pretty interesting and kind of scary.
What did they teach you in the service?
They taught me time management. They taught me to appreciate the little things. And they taught me that you have way more ability than you think, physically and mentally.
And where did you serve?
I did basic in South Carolina at Fort Jackson. I went from there to Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, Texas, which is the big military medical training academy down there. And from there, my actually whole unit, the whole brigade of us got sent over as medics to Germany. And anyone that had orders for schooling like I did, they got rescinded. So they said that when you got 5/6 of your tour done in Germany, they would send you back to school. But every time you got close, they just extended you over there. So I served over in Germany at the 3rd Armored Division, and it was the 122nd Support Group out of Hanau, Germany, which is just south of Frankfurt.
Did you serve during a war?
I served during what is called the Cold War, and it was towards the end of the Cold War when tensions were starting to build because the Allies wanted a unified Germany, and they were trying to kind of push the Russians out of the Eastern Germany and out of the East Bloc countries.
Did you see combat?
I never did see combat, just a lot of terrorist activities, and there were quite a few protests against Americans when I was over there, and there was a couple times where they were marching in between our post and burning the flag, and so they lined us all up outside the post, and we were getting pelted by rocks and spit on, and it was scary.
What did you believe at that time was at stake in the war?
Well, we believed the safety of both the German public and Americans that were living over there was at stake, making sure that West Germany was not invaded, and to try and usher in the reunification of Germany.
How did you feel about the enemy you were fighting?
Russians, we were all kind of terrified of the Russians. They kind of had a reputation. There was a couple times when they actually caught Russians spying on our training, and they did have what they called they were Soviet military liaison people, and they had to have special tags on their vehicles, and we were taught what to look for, and there were certain areas where they could go and certain areas where they couldn't go, and if you saw one in an area where they weren't supposed to go, you were supposed to report that immediately, and we did have that happen once. And the terrorists, we were we were afraid of them too. I mean, because you just didn't know what was going to happen.
How do you feel about them now?
Well, now, having lived a little bit, I've learned that you can't really judge a person unless you've gone through what they've gone through. And they were doing what they felt was their job. As far as the terrorists go, I feel kind of sad that they had to resort to fear and hurting civilians.
Mm-hmm. Did you write home often?
I wrote home as much as I could. It took, probably 2 weeks to get a letter from overseas back to the States.
Did you describe what you were actually experiencing in your letters?
I never really did because my mom was pretty ill at the time and I really didn't want to get her upset. And it was upsetting enough just hearing what was going on over there in the news.
Yeah. So what reminded you most of home when you were overseas?
The weather is what reminded me the most about home because the weather in Germany is a lot like the weather in Nebraska.
And what did you look forward to the most when you thought about coming home?
I looked forward to seeing my family and to actually be able to take a shower by myself and have my own bathroom.
What do you think people today should know about what you went through?
Basically, that even during the Cold War, there were things that were going on, and that it was a time of turmoil over in Europe, and there were some people that didn't come back from there.
Yeah. So tell me about a couple of your most memorable experiences.
Well, off duty, my husband and I, he was my boyfriend at the time, we went on a tour down to Munich, and it was Oktoberfest. And before we got to Munich, the tour stopped at Dachau, which is one of the prison camps that the Nazis used for the Jewish people. And so we toured there. We went to get back on the bus only to see it pulling out of the parking lot.
Oh
So we got left at Dachau, and thank goodness we were able to get on a train and we got to Munich. Well, my husband Bruce had remembered the license plate of the bus. We got to the area where they were having Oktoberfest, this huge fairground area, and there was probably 300 tour buses parked.
Oh, wow.
So we looked through every row. Finally, the very last row, we found our tour bus. And we knew what time they were leaving, so we went on into Oktoberfest, and they had these huge 2-story tents, and all the different breweries and beer houses. And so we were in this one tent, and we were sharing a beer, which over there, they were liter mugs, which were huge. And this big burly German guy comes up and grabs the mug of beer from my husband and drinks it. And he hands it back to my husband, and my husband tells him, just a minute, and he orders another beer and gives it to the guy. And the guy is like, ask us what our names were, and Bruce goes, my name is Bruce. So he's like, come Bruce, and he looks at me and he goes, come Bruce, come. And so we followed him over to these tables. They had these tables with these long benches, and the guy picks up the end of the bench, and people are sliding off the other end of the bench. Set Bruce. So we sat there and drank with him and his friends and sang Oompa songs, and it got time to go, and Bruce told him, that we had to leave. And this big burly German grabbed Bruce by the face and kissed him right on the lips. Auf Wiedersehen, Bruce. He grabs me, kisses me right on the lips. Auf Wiedersehen, Bruce. I'll just never forget that. It was so hilarious.
Were you awarded any medals or citations?
I was awarded a few citations. One of the most memorable ones was for avoiding an accident in a 5-ton military ER truck, which I had just got my license, and we were going down a huge grade on the road, and the airlines blew on my truck. And when that happens, everything on that truck is run by air pressure, so no brakes, no horn, nothing like that. I went flying by all the trucks that were in our convoy. I had a generator on behind the truck, and the weight of it was really just pushing me down the hill. And I was finally able to downshift enough to slow it down and get over to the side of the road without having it roll or lock. Those brakes will lock up on you after like about 20 seconds. And then when that happens, you're probably going to roll the vehicle or you're going to skid. And so I guess because I didn't kill anybody or cause an accident, they gave me a citation. I got honor graduate in medic school. That was really hard to do, and that's something that I've always been kind of proud of. And I got the Army Achievement Medal for my medical support in Reforger, which was where the National Guard would come over and play war games.
Did you ever get promoted?
I did get promoted. When I went into the Army, because I had a college degree, they gave me 3 ranks, so I was a PFC. And when I was over in Germany, I got promoted to specialist, which is a E4.
Did you stay in touch with your family?
I did as much as I could, mostly my mother. We got one 20-minute phone call a month, and we had to go to the USO to do it. It cost us about $100 to do that. And other than that, it was writing letters was the only way. There was one time when I had to get a hold of the Red Cross to go check on my mom because I hadn't heard from her, and I was really kind of concerned. So that was one way where you could get in touch with your family, or they could get in touch with you if there was, something going on back home.
So what was the food like?
The food in basic was not great. And a lot of times they made us eat these dehydrated meals. And in fact, in basic, it was Thanksgiving, and they marched us into the mess hall, and there was this nice big turkey and pie. And the drill sergeants ate that and gave us the dehydrated meals. And when I went on to advanced training, it was a little bit better. Over in Germany, the food out on the economy, which is like out in the public, was phenomenal. Army food, if you were in the field, you might have the same meal, but they would just change the name to make you think you were getting something. They made this, it was goulash is what it really was, but they had like 5 different names for it. So every day you would get that, but they would just name it something different.
Did you feel pressure or stress?
It was very stressful. Getting through basic, just being able to get through basic was stressful. Some of the things you had to do, I was petrified. We had to throw 2 live grenades, and that was really scary to me. And then going into medic school, you got 2 chances to pass, and if you didn't, then you washed out, and they could just put you wherever they wanted to send you. So that was kind of stressful. In Germany, the things that were going on with the terrorists were stressful, and there was a lot of times when you would be out in the field and you were it for medical, so it was your decision making how to treat patients, and we had some pretty bad accidents, a couple fatalities, and that was stressful because it was a lot of weight on your shoulders because you had no one to ask.
So how do people entertain themselves?
Mostly going out on the economy, traveling. Movies were really big over there because almost every post had a movie theater, so we did that a lot. Volts marching, we would go to festivals and they would always have a Volts march, and you would basically kind of like the runs or the walks they have in the States usually was tied to to a charity or something they were trying to raise money for, and you would wander through the town or woods or wherever they would have it.
Did you do something special for good luck?
I did. After my little mishap with the truck, which I was going down to the training area, everyone that was a driver would get to go to a stuffed animal factory that they had down there in Bavaria, and you would get to pick out your very own good luck animal. And I had a dog, and a lot of people chose dogs, and we called them graph dogs. And they went with us whenever we went out into the field.
So what did you do when on leave?
On leave, we slept a lot and travel mostly.
Can you tell me about some places you went?
Yeah, I got to go to a lot of awesome places. We went to Austria, got to see the town where Mozart did a lot of his work. Got to go to Switzerland and Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, Paris, Spain, and up in Denmark.
Do you recall any particularly humorous or unusual events?
There were a few humorous events. When I was in medic school, we had exercises where we would have to pretend to be patients, and we had one guy in our unit that he was kind of over the top, and he would cry wolf and stuff and try to get attention, and he was supposed to pretend that he was a psychiatric patient. And so we had to catch him, and we strapped him between two stretchers, and he just kept carrying on, screaming, yelling, and everything. Well, we finally realized that we had set him on top of a fire ant hill, and he was getting bitten by fire ants.
Gosh.
And he ended up having to go to the emergency room for his fire ant bites. So, basic training number 1. And I am up here in the top row. And that was kind of more of an easygoing group with drill sergeants and everything. When I got to number 2, these people were pretty hardcore, hence the steel pots and the guns and the pictures. So that's basic. When we got our uniforms, they would always take your picture in just like a sample uniform they had. And so there I am after I got my uniform. And here, this is the front gate going into Fort Sam Houston. It's a really pretty post, and it's right in the middle of town there. And an old watchtower that they use there. This is one of the medical evac helicopters that we had. This is my friend Jarvis and I underneath the barracks for the medic school. They were all built up on stilts, and so they had an area underneath where you'd have like a lot of activities, and if you weren't making your bed right, they would bring it down and you'd have to make your bed in front of everybody for however long they wanted you to do that, and that did happen. Here's my good friend Daryl, and he's in one of the Jeeps that we used as an ambulance there. This is my mom and a friend and I at the Alamo, which is right smack downtown in San Antonio. And this is me out on the town and going on the San Antonio trolley. This is me at the Riverwalk, which is a really famous touristy area that's downtown in San Antonio. And here I am getting ready to get on the plane to go to Germany with my friend Gloria, and my mom is getting ready to say goodbye to us. And that's kind of the last picture before we got on the plane there. This is a picture outside the barracks in Hanau in Germany. That's kind of what the outside looked like. Here I am eating my birthday cake that my mom sent me over in Germany with one of my roommates, Janet. We were really happy to see that. This is kind of the outside of the barracks, and they were just huge, huge old buildings. This is the castle that's in Hanau, and almost every town or city you go to has a castle, and it's where all the festivals and things take place. And that's my roommate Janet and I in front of the castle there. This is a festival we went to at the castle. We thought that there was a nice festival going on, but come to find out it was an anti-American rally. And we found that out when we went in one of the tents, and they had flags for sale that had bombs instead of stars on the flag of the United States. So we got out of there fast. This is a picture of us on a Volts March. And another picture on the Volts March. And this is one of my favorite things I got to do. This is the Rhine River cruise, which goes down the Rhine River in Germany, and you get to see all sorts of castles. And last but not least, here is my Graf dog, my good luck charm that went with me everywhere. And that's about it for pictures.
Did you make any close friendships while in the service?
I did make a lot of close friendships, clear from basic on. When you go through that with people, you just get close to them. And a couple people from basic went all the way through with me to Germany, so.
Did you continue any of these relationships?
I didn't for a very long time because it was really hard to know where people even were stationed in Germany. Once we got over there, we got split up. And there was only one gal that was from my medic school that went with me to my unit, and she ended up getting kicked out of the Army not very long after we got there. So it was really kind of hard to keep in touch with people, but I have got back in touch with my roommate Janet, and knowing that she lived out in California. And thanks to Facebook, now it's a little easier. It's hard in that a lot of women, when they get married, change their name. And there are some friends that I had that I don't even know what their first name was because we always went by our last name. So.
Do you recall the day your service ended?
I do. I got orders to go back to Fort Dix. That's in New Jersey. And when they took us to go get on the plane, there was a huge protest outside the Air Force Base where we were flying out of. And we didn't even know if we were going to actually be able to get into the Air Force Base, but we finally did get in and flew out. It was a very long flight. We got over Iceland, and water started running down the inside of the plane.
Oh no.
That was kind of scary, but the stewardess acted like it was something that happened a lot. But I was 8 months pregnant, and I think the hormones were kicking in because I was kind of freaking out there. But I got to Fort Dix, and we had a lot of paperwork to do. We got to sit and watch all the new recruits doing some of the first things that we did, and I just thought, boy, you guys don't even have a clue what's coming down the line for you guys. But then they flew us back to Nebraska.
Yeah. So what did you do in the days and weeks afterwards?
Afterwards, I took my husband to meet my family because we were married overseas, so he had not even met any of my family. And we just spent time with family, and then went out to F.E. Warren Air Force Base to stay until my son was born. And after that, I ended up down in Kansas and worked as a respiratory therapist down there.
So tell me a little bit more about like work and school afterwards.
So afterwards, I went down to work as a respiratory therapist. Took lots of classes down there. Ended up, it was before you had to be registered and have a degree to be a respiratory therapist. So when that all came to pass, I was 3 months short of getting a grandfather clause license. So ended up moving back to McCook, Nebraska, and I worked for McCook Hospital for a little bit, and then worked for Walmart as a pharmacy tech. My husband Bruce ended up getting a job in the post office, and we ended up here in Aurora. So I ended up working for the schools for a little bit as the lunch lady over at the elementary school. And then I got an opportunity to work for Principal Financial Group and did medical insurance and explained to people what their benefits were.
Mm-hmm.
And after I was there about a year and a half, the hospital had a position open in their coding department, so I took that, and I've been there almost 20 years now.
Was your education supported by the GI Bill?
I actually could not get the GI Bill because I already had a bachelor's degree, but the Army did pay all my loans off.
Did you take any college classes while you were in the service?
I took quite a few college classes. I took paramedic school, which was through a college, and the Army had its own correspondence college courses, and those would help with your promotion points. So I took a lot of medical correspondence courses when I was over there.
Did you join a veterans organization?
I have not joined any veterans organizations. My dates of service are just short of being during what they consider a wartime. And so, like, in order to join the Legion, you have to be during a wartime.
Uh-huh.
So I really have not.
Have you attended any reunions?
I haven't attended any reunions, just kind of getting to talk to the few people that I've gotten in contact with is kind of like a reunion. But I have found now on Facebook that there's a 3rd Armored Division page, and so I'm hoping sometime in the future maybe we'll have a reunion.
Yeah. Did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
It has affected my thinking. War, I don't know how people that are actually out in combat, how they survived it. Just knowing the chaos of just being in the regular Army and knowing what they went through. The military, I think that for a lot of people it's good. There's some things that happen in the military that maybe aren't so good. And I guess I'll give the example of we were out as medical support for this battalion run, and there was a big general that had showed up, and so they were going to have this whole battalion was going to run in formation and impress him. And in the military, if somebody forgets their coat, no one can wear their coat. If somebody forgets their gloves, no one can wear their gloves. It's kind of a thing for peer pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there was this guy who had forgot his gloves, and he had frostbite before. So he came in and told us, so we went to his commander and said, he's got to wear gloves because he's been frostbit. Well, the minute we turned our back, his commander told him you can't wear his gloves. Well, sure enough, when the run was over, he comes in to the first aid tent, and his fingers are all swollen up, and he's got frostbite, and he lost some of his fingers. And that's the kind of things in the military I think that they could change.
Yeah.
Because, it didn't have to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that for a lot of people, you do learn discipline, and you learn to appreciate your country and to appreciate the small things in life.
Yeah. Is there anything you would like to add that we have not covered?
I don't regret going into the service. I would do it again. And I'm just really thankful for the people who volunteer and for the families that actually really serve too.
Yeah, it's really nice. Would you like to show your uniform and explain them a little
Sure.
bit?
So this here, I don't know, we'll get it in.
Yeah, there
This
you go.
is what for years was the Army Class A uniform and jacket, and you have your unit. So that's the 3rd Armored Division crest. It has, this would be what your specialty was, and so that's the medical specialty. If you were an engineer, you would have that, whatever your specialty was. Going on down, these are your awards and your medals that you've won. This is an expert M16 rifle badge, which you had to shoot 38 out of 40 targets to get. Your awards, what is closest to the midline is the most prestigious or highest award. So this is a Good Conduct Medal, the Army Service Ribbon, and the Overseas Service Ribbon. And on the top here is my Army Achievement Medal. And since it's higher in the row, that means that's the most prestigious medal I got was the Army Achievement Medal. Over here you have your name tag and your rank, and this is, it's the crest for the combat medic, which was awarded to me for getting the honor graduate. All your uniform, they have regulations where this has to be sewn so many inches down from your sleeve. All your medals have to be measured out and put on there to their specifications. And there was at least twice where they had big generals and stuff coming where they would come with a yardstick or a ruler and measure your uniform to make sure that you were compliant with that. So that's the uniform.
Nice.